VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. These Vikings are 2-0, undefeated. We have a battle of the undefeateds this Sunday. Noon, Houston Texans. We didn't think the Vikings would be undefeated. We thought Houston probably would. And in order to be undefeated, you have to have some surprise players stand off the page. And that's what Josh Frey and I are going to discuss today. He's with me in the studio every Wednesday. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, 2-0 for the Minnesota Vikings. A crazy win over the 49ers last week. When you think about it, they didn't have Justin Jefferson down the stretch, no Jordan Addison for the entire game. Like Sam Darnold just stepping up and saying, "Yeah, it's that reigning NFC champs. No big deal. We can take them out." That was just a wild game. Excited to talk about it.
I'm going to ask you, in case I forget at the end of the show, a lot of the 2022 Vikings wins were nail biters or last second field goals or flat out lucky against Buffalo because of the goal line fumble. Do you think the Vikings are a legitimate playoff contender? Like when you watch this team, is it good, and sustainable?
I mean, at this point, I don't really see anything that would suggest that this team can't compete for a playoff spot. You know, it just seems like they have exactly the right balance. Like the running game is working between Ty Chandler and Aaron Jones. Sam Darnold isn't throwing the dumb interceptions like we saw last year with Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs, Jared Hall sometimes. So seems like as long as he can take care of the ball through the entire season, just be basically the Brock Purdy game manager of the Kevin O'Connell Minnesota Vikings offense, I think that the offense is going to be fine. And Brian Flores has had the defense rolling on all cylinders right now across the board. So, I mean, if you break down all three of those aspects, like as long as those things continue, and it seems like we have the pieces in place that it should be able to continue, at least for the majority of the season, there's really no reason that this team can't make a run for the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I took a lot of elation in knowing that they beat the 49ers somewhat handily. Like the game never felt in doubt, and almost every win in the last 3, 4, 5 years feels like, whoo, boy, we did that one.
Finally.
Yep. And this one, even though it got nerve-wracking there because it was the 49ers, this one felt somewhat convincing. And then the Giants thing, I never understood last week. After the Vikings beat the Giants, it was like, oh, this team's shitty. The only team worse than them is the Panthers. It's like, well, we just started saying that when the Vikings beat them, and then the Vikings beat them by 22 points. What did you want them to do?
Exactly. No, I mean, the Giants might be the worst team in the league other than the Carolina Panthers at this point, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that the Vikings did exactly what good teams are supposed to do to bad teams, and it's beat the brakes off of them throughout the entire game. And that's exactly what Minnesota did last week. They didn't quite handle the 49ers as handily as they did a couple weeks ago against the Giants, but it was still a very convincing win. And like you said, it wasn't really a moment where you're like, oh man, this thing's starting to fall apart. They just seemed in control throughout the entire game. And it was pretty reminiscent of the game last year. So I don't know if it's just Kevin O'Connell kind of has Kyle Shanahan's number at this point. But I mean, if you're just looking at these past 2 weeks, like there's really nothing here that suggests that this team is, oh, it's just a flash in the pan. They can't really continue to do this thing or this thing throughout the entire season. This was a fluke here. This is a fluke here. If anything, they've had a couple like weird turnovers still where it's like, yeah, the Vikings should have maybe not been as dominant in these past 2 games as they have been. So if anything, it feels like they should be more dominant than they have.
Or like, I can't remember which quarter it was, second or third, when there was that fumble. And we just never recover those in the last couple of years. It's like, oh God, why don't we ever get like a split of those? The only time where I guess I would have felt a little apprehensive or anxietal was the game sealing drive on offense because Jefferson was out. Addison didn't play. Hawkinson's on the pup. I think Aaron Jones was out for some of that drive. And it felt like a Vikings drive. Maybe it was a Kirk Cousins fear that I had, like, oh, this thing's going 3 and out. Then we just got to hope for the best at the end. But Sam Darnold was absolutely masterful. The little dinker throws to Brandon Powell and then the dart to Jalen Naylor. Man, that was kind of the moment I think we needed to see. All right, we want to do some surprise players because we didn't get here on accident. There had to be unsung standout performers. I think you have a list of 4, and I'm going to try to fill in the gaps for dudes who you won't mention. So right out of the gate, a surprise performer for these Vikings, go.
I think number 1 on my list right now is Patrick Jones. Just the way that this dude has performed through the first 2 weeks of the season. This is a guy that keep in mind, coming into training camp, I thought he was a cut candidate. And I think a lot of people thought that this guy was a cut candidate, especially with how deep the Vikings were at the outside linebacker position coming into training camp. Like, Patrick Jones, he recorded 5 sacks through his first 3 seasons in the NFL. And he was like one of PFF's worst pass rushers throughout the entirety of the 2023 season. Like, whenever this dude was on the field, it seemed like things were going wrong. And now he's totaled 4 sacks through 2 games. He's second in the league in sacks. He's one of PFF's best pass rushers in the entire league. And like, the Vikings, we knew that they were going to have probably 3 pretty solid pass rushers between Jonathan Grenard, Dallas Turner, and Andrew Van Ginkel. And now they've seemingly got a 4th guy in Patrick Jones. And I think Patrick Jones just coming in, filling in those pass rush snaps when they need him. And he's a big reason why the Vikings are number 1 in sacks through the first 2 weeks of the season with 11, and they're one of the best teams in terms of overall pass rush throughout the entire season if you look at all the metrics. So Patrick Jones just coming out and bursting onto the scene over the past few weeks has been just really cool to see.
So the pass rushing depth, him included, is part of the reason why this defense is humming, because last year, to generate any sort of pass rush outside of Danielle Hunter, you had to send surprise secret guys from either the secondary or the inside linebackers. And this year you just don't have to do that because they're organically generating the pressure. And Patrick Jones is a huge reason. Yeah, I'm the guy who said that, well, Kwesi didn't draft this guy. Gabriel Murphy could be good. Bo Richter looks kind of solid. Patrick Jones is probably on the way out. And that wasn't because I'm anti-Patrick Jones. It's because, like you said last year, his advanced metrics flat out weren't very good. And he was one of the worst pass rushers in football. But it's a testament to what an offseason can do. My first one to go kind of back and forth here is Blake Brandel. Now, I have thought since about spring that he would end up being really good or serviceable at worst, because they knew the moment they turned the page on the offseason, this guy was going to be their left guard. And in order to supplant Dalton Reisner, who has a pretty popular profile and is a very good pass blocker, you have to have something that you've shown the coaching staff. So from the moment they said 3 years, $9.5 million to Blake Brandel, it was evident to me that they like him. So one of my bold predictions about a month ago was that Brandel's going to flat out be a baller for these Vikings. And so far he has, I think, a top 10 PFF grade among offensive guards. His first game was much better than this Niners game, but he was also pretty damn good against the 49ers. So if you're able to easily just shoo Dalton Reisner to the side and say, hey, bitch, go play right guard because I got this one. And Dalton Reisner is a lifelong left guard. To me, Brandel was always going to be pretty decent, and through 2 games that has been effectuated. And I only say surprise because some Vikings fans, who just watch the games and don't get obsessed like we do, they're like, who the hell is this? This is the guy that used to play tackle 3 years ago? Yes, and he's quite good. So I got Brandel. You got Patrick Jones. What else do we got?
Number 2 on my list, I'm going to switch over to the offensive side of the ball as well here. I think Jalen Nailor and just his ability to come in and fill that wide receiver 3 role exactly in the way that the Vikings have needed. Like, this was a position all offseason where you and I were talking about on this very show, like, oh man, when are the Vikings going to eventually fill this WR3 spot? What are they going to do at this position? Is it really just going to be Brandon Powell, Jalen Nailor, and the rest of the crew holding down the depth spots behind Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson? And turns out that's exactly what the Vikings did, and that's exactly needed to do, because Jalen Nailor has come out and just been absolutely fantastic over the first 2 weeks of the season. I think he's 4 receptions, 75 yards, a couple touchdowns. That 3rd down conversion, like you mentioned, on that game-sealing drive from Sam Darnold, that was absolutely crucial last weekend against the 49ers. And I think especially when Addison and Jefferson are back on the field fully healthy, we finally have, and TJ Hawkinson, once we finally have this full slew of offensive weapons around Sam Darnold, I think Jalen Nailor is going to be the perfect complement as a deep threat to the rest of these guys. And I'm really excited to see what he can do for the rest of the year.
And that's another thing the Vikings coaching staff knew right around the time they re-signed Brandel. They knew that Nailor was going to be the guy at WR3. It's just that a lot of us were like, you mean the guy who's injured every single week with something? I mean, he's still on the injury report every week, even if he's had his little blossom. But kudos to them for staying committed to him. And then his, I guess you'd call it blocking, but it was more like Olympic speed to clear the lane for Jefferson to finish off his touchdown run was the stuff of legends. And I agree with you that once these other guy comes back, Naylor is just going to feast even more. I tweeted that last week after the game that it's cool that the Vikings can beat elite teams without Hawkinson, Addison, and Reisner. People gave me a lot of shade for throwing Reisner in there, but I think the guy's pretty decent. Maybe not as good as Hawkinson and Addison, but Naylor, the unabashed WR3 right now. And when it got down to brass tacks last Sunday, he was the WR1 for a single drive, and he did not disappoint. So Speedy Naylor here to stay. Let's see, this is his third season, so he's got one more year with the Vikings after this. A surprise standout, mainly because we didn't think that he would be a viable WR3 candidate this offseason because the injury resume was so long. My next one is real quick, and this one is a little ticky-tack because it's limited sample size. Bataki Taimani, like the Vikings' one true nose tackle, has a 70-something PFF, and he's playing a little bit here and there. But, I mean, that's not his fault. When he is on the field, he is delivering. And this was a guy, Oregon alumnus, that when you started to look at the landscape of the summer roster, you're like, God, they need some big bodies. And so one of my surprise picks to make the roster was Taki Taimani, because I saw a little bit at Oregon, and that was impressive. And then he's just huge. And it's cool that an undrafted free agent is getting a little bit of playing time early on, and the Vikings defense is just humming. So it's not like this is garbage time where you're throwing him in. He's getting a little bit of action, and he's making the most of it. So I've got Brandel, Taimani. You have Patrick Jones, of course. Jalen Naylor doing the thing at WR3. Give me a couple more. Let's start with the next one, I should say.
Yeah, let's stick with defense here again. And I honestly, this is a guy, I don't necessarily know if it's his production that's been ultra surprising for me, but just the way that Brian Flores has used him so far this season, and that's Jihad Ward. Typically been an outside linebacker throughout basically his entire career, especially these past 2 seasons with the New York Giants. He played over 1,000 snaps as like a true outside linebacker edge rusher for New York. And then it was just like 300 snaps on other areas of the defensive line, like A gap, B gap, all that sort of stuff. But this year, that's completely flipped. Like he's played almost 50 snaps on the defensive line for the Vikings, and none of them have been as a true edge rusher for Minnesota outside of the tackles. Like this dude is completely just swapped over to the defensive tackle spot, and I think he's even listed as like a defensive tackle on PFF now because of that. So it's really funny to see that. But yeah, this dude, he's come in, and the Vikings, again, another thing that we talked about all offseason was where are they going to get some interior pass rush support from this defense, and when are they eventually going to sign like this big defensive tackle presence to go after these quarterbacks? And turns out the solution was Jihad Ward, because this dude's got 7 pressures through the first 2 weeks of the year. He's been like a couple inches away from getting a couple sacks in there as well. I think he's got 4 QB hits so far through the first 2 weeks. So this dude basically switching to defensive tackle has been really productive in Brian Flores' defense, and it's been really cool to see. And I did not see that coming at all from Jihad Ward this season.
So it's really funny that you say that about PFF. We have a new site called Draft Huddle that we have got off the ground in the last week, and I was doing some homework on Dallas Turner. His PFF grade isn't dazzling yet, but I pulled up the edge rusher rankings from PFF, and I couldn't find Jihad Ward, because once I saw Turner, I was like, oh, I got to go check on my other guys. And Jihad Ward wasn't on there. And I was like, I swore this guy has played enough snaps to qualify. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm stupid. But he's straight up listed as a D tackle.
I literally went this morning and it says defensive line next to Jihad Ward. So yeah.
Oh, that's sweet. Does he, I have to go back and watch now. In the dirt right in the middle of the line?
Yeah, I think he's been a lot like as like a defensive end, but there are definitely a couple snaps where he is like right in the middle of the defensive line as well. So yeah, he's just completely flipped everything that he's used to doing on the defense on the defensive side this season.
Yeah, in the 3-4, it always gets confusing when they're like, "Hey, Jonathan Bullard's our defensive end." It's like, no, he's not. Don't try to pull that on me. He's a defensive tackle.
Nice try.
Yep. So I see what you're saying. Yeah, they used to do that with James Lynch too. Like, yeah, he's the D end, and I'm like, it's not by my Zimmer definition. Folks.
Yeah.
My other one, kind of in the same vein, is a true defensive end, Jerry Tillery. So when the Vikings signed him in March, I think this show included, we were like, oh, yay, got him, huh? When there was about 10 other defensive tackles who were on the market, a lot of them significantly more expensive than Tillery. So unfairly, we were really low on Tillery because we thought Wilkins was coming through that door. God, there was a bunch of them back in March. And then the draft, remember that run in the second round? It was like, well, we're not getting any of those guys.
Yeah.
Yep. So Tillery came through and we're like, well, this is our solution, I guess. And quietly last year for the Raiders, he had a 68 or something PFF. And I was thinking in the summer, like, well, if he brings that over to the Vikings, we'll take it. And that is what he has done so far. You can't find too many sob stories about the Vikings defense or the Vikings on the whole. And so Tillery has done his part, or at least towed the line for his usual performance in the last year or two. And that's important because if the rest of the defense is cooking like it is, all of these edge rushers, the edge rush, there's so much pass rush, we don't even really care what's going on in the secondary. Like, I haven't done deep dive on any of the new cornerbacks because it feels like they're doing just fine with all these two quarterbacks under duress. So Tillery gets a special shout out from me. Because he was or is teetering on that first round bust. Like, he'll never be, I don't think he'll be the Pro Bowler we thought he could be when the Chargers took him in 4 or 5 years ago. But for now, he's doing his job as a Viking at an affordable price tag. All right, I think you got one more. Who is it?
I mean, we can't finish this list without talking about the quarterback of this team, and that's Sam Darnold. This dude's just been like, even without Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, we talked about it at the top of the show. This dude just went out and said, yeah, no problem. I'm going to beat the 49ers. It's no big deal. We can take this team out. And he's been fantastic. I can't really put it any other way through the first 2 weeks of the season. Like, this dude has completely surprised me. And it's really a testament to not only his work ethic, but just Kevin O'Connell's scheme and just how they have set this offense up to have success. And it's really exciting to see just everything really come together for this team, despite all the injuries that they had leading up to this season, like all the weird stuff that has happened throughout this offseason for this team. And to see it really come together behind Sam Darnold, a reclamation project at the quarterback position, has just been really awesome to see. And this dude's on pace to break his career high in passing yards by over 1,000 yards, like double his passing touchdown career high. It's just been awesome. I can't really put it any other way.
So my best frame of reference for our Darnold observations. So we go to every home game, my wife, my son, and my wife's best friend. And my wife watches every Vikings game, but she doesn't like study it all week and shit like we do. She's a normal person. And so when we were driving home, I said to her, God, it's just so weird that Darnold isn't a downgrade from Cousins. And she went, downgrade? She's like, what are you talking about? She was like, you can't see that he's a lot better than Kirk? And it struck a chord with me. And I was like, well, gosh, I think it's because of either the past performance by Darnold versus the money that Cousins make. I'm not sure what it was, but it was like, in her mind, she understands football fully. She's like, this guy's an upgrade. Are you nuts?
No, yeah, it's really funny you bring that up because I was watching this game on Sunday and I went back and watched some of the 49ers game from last year, and it's like Sam Darnold looks almost exactly like Kirk Cousins when you watch those two games side by side. It's really cool to see, and I think it's just really a testament to how Kevin O'Connell has framed this offense, where you can plug in guys like even those. It's been 11 games of Josh Dobbs, Jaron Hall, Nick Mullins, Sam Darnold, and the Vikings are basically playing 500 football. Like with these backup level quarterbacks throughout their entire careers, where you'd be like, we cannot have this guy be our quarterback of this team and play competitive football. And the Vikings are doing exactly that with these guys because Kevin O'Connell's just a quarterback whisperer.
And it's worth noting too that last year, when it was clear and evident that it was going to be a quarterback carousel the rest of the way, the Vikings didn't start losing because of quarterback play. It was because the defense died against Cincinnati Bengals in the fourth quarter and never recovered. Flat out, there was never any more semblance of rebirth or competence from that defense. That's why Nick Mullins got such a bad rap. The guy was just slinging it all over the place, and we give him an 0-2, 0-3 QB wins record. But the defense, for some reason, died, and now it's back. So I think that if the defense had remained as is, we would be talking about Mullins last year like we were Joe Flacco. Like, oh my God, this guy can do it. So the defense, if it stays the way it is, there's a lot of different quarterbacks that could win with these Vikings. It just so happens that Darnold looks good. Now, the question, sir, I've talked about this on this show a few times, is with Josh Dobbs, we saw the 2 good games, and then he completely face-planted and looked like a moron. Jake Browning last year with the Bengals had about 3 good games and then came back to earth a little bit. It seems like every quarterback, QB2, worth his salt, has those 1 or 2 games where it's like, hey, this guy, he might be the next big story. And then he usually comes tumbling back to earth because defensive coordinators figuring him out, or he wasn't that good in the first place in Josh Dobbs' case. Can Sam Darnold be different?
That's a really good question. I think I'm definitely still on the wait and see kind of train with this, just because I don't think he's going to be the guy where we're looking up in January and he's near the league leaders in passing yards and passing touchdowns. I just don't think that's going to be the case this season. I think the Vikings are going to have to find some other ways to get to the 10-7, 11-6, or whatever it takes to make the playoffs this year. But I do think that, Sam Darnold, unlike Jake Browning, unlike Josh Dobbs, he's had seasons in his career where he's been the main quarterback of teams, whether it's the New York Jets or the Carolina Panthers. Like, obviously those teams weren't spectacular, or even close to spectacular, but this dude has at least had seasons of starting experience at the NFL level, and we've seen him put together some pretty productive seasons, like 2019. And I think that at the very least, this dude is capable of being a top 20, top half of the league quarterback, where at the end of the year, we're looking at this Vikings team and we're saying the quarterback position isn't a liability on this roster. Whereas by the end of the Josh Dobbs or the Nick Mullins era last year, we were thinking, well, I guess it is kind of time to plug in a different guy at this position, because we're not going to be able to keep winning with what we've got right now.
Yeah, if Darnold does somehow keep up this exact pace, and the Vikings keep winning, and he has 4,000 yards, 32 touchdowns, oh boy, are we going to have some discussions in January, February.
We're looking at like 15-2, 13-4, something like that.
Yeah, it'll be wild. I got 3 more things for you that have come to mind. I want your opinion. Who is a better thrower of the football, Sam Darnold or Kirk Cousins? If you were scouting them as a draft scout tonight.
I think I'm still going with Kirk Cousins.
Okay.
I just think we've got a longer history of him doing the thing at the quarterback position, and Monday night was another testament to just how good Kirk can be when he's dialed in. Like, that last minute drive against the Eagles was just
effortless,
fantastic. Yeah, just you took a blink and all of a sudden they were in the red zone. Like, I don't know if it's more of a testament to how good the Falcons offense is with Kirk, or how bad the Eagles defense was down the stretch of that game, but Kirk was just lighting them up for the most of the game. And that week 1 game was bad, but it's week 1. I'm not gonna freak out too much about that. So I would still take Kirk ultimately.
Okay, so if it was like a throwing competition at the Pro Bowl, you would take Kirk over Darnold, whether it's accuracy and arm strength. Yeah. Okay, I thought you might say Darnold because you scouted him in the 2018 draft and the arm was pretty dazzling.
Yeah, I'm coming around to Darnold, but I need to ask me again in week 8, and we'll see if both of these guys are on the same trajectory as they've been over the first couple of seasons. We'll see what my answer is.
Yeah, you don't want to be on record on video saying that Darnold has a better arm than Kirk, and then we're 2-6 here.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to jinx anything.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. All right, unrelated to the Vikings, I think. Bryce Young benched. The Panthers have a notable reputation now for screwing up their quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield was a Pro Bowler last year. Sam Darnold looks like he's heading that way. Now they're benching Bryce Young. I want to know, did we get him wrong in terms of the draft scouting? And then B, how does this thing get resolved in general?
I don't necessarily think we can say that we were wrong about Bryce Young as a player. Listen, when that draft was happening, the worst case scenario in my mind was him landing in Carolina. And that is exactly what happened. Like, I think Carolina is just, especially now, post Cam Newton, everything, this franchise is just a death trap for quarterbacks. We've seen Baker Mayfield struggle here, and now he's flourishing in Tampa Bay. We saw Sam Darnold struggle there, and he's now flourishing in Minnesota. Like, this franchise is just destined to be terrible at the quarterback position unless they fix everything else around them. Like, the offensive line sucks. The defense is absolutely horrible. We saw, maybe it's less of a fluke now about the Saints dropping 47 on them in week 1, but they're on pace to be historically bad this year. And it's
the White Sox.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking at maybe the first 0-17 team in the NFL if things keep going the way that they are. So I'm not ready to put all of the blame on Bryce Young. Yes, he's had his moments where he's definitely struggled in Carolina, but I think if you plug him into a different offense with a competent head coach, with a defense that can at least take some of the pressure off of him, with a real running game, like, can you name a running back? Yeah, exactly. He's been injured. The Miles Sanders thing hasn't worked, and it's just a whole disaster in Carolina. Can go on and on about it, and I'm not ready to put the blame on Bryce Young for that.
All right, so tell me, do the Panthers say, "Hey, homie, in week 12 we are 1-11. We're going back to you to finish this bitch out"? Or if he gets traded, where would he go and how much would he cost?
Oh gosh. Man, this is really tough on the spot, man. But I think if we're looking at week 12 with the Carolina Panthers and they're 1-11, I think they're ultimately just they're swinging for the fences for another top 5 pick and taking another stab at a quarterback, because at this point, they don't have a second-round pick this year because they also traded that away to Chicago for Bryce Young. But I think they're just kind of in that track where they need to maximize that first-round pick. And maybe it means just keeping Bryce Young around on the bench and just riding out with Sam Darnold or whoever else they want to plug into that team, because I don't think anybody's going to have too much success in that offense right now. But trading away Bryce Young less than 2 years since you traded all of that capital to take him first overall, I think that would be just absolutely insane. A team that would take him, I mean, I don't even know. Do you have anybody in mind right now?
If the Tua thing goes south, it makes sense.
That would be a
good
one. Yeah, that makes
the Broncos
sense.
have too many things going on there, even though we were all right. Bo Nix looks like shit right away.
Yeah.
I don't know. It could be like a stat. Like, let's say the Panthers like, you guys don't know Bryce like we do. We want to be done. Going to the Rams as a contingency plan.
That would be a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, just thinking out loud. Wayne, what do you think? Like, let's say he remains benched until the trade deadline, which is election day. Would a team spend like a third or a fourth, or what would they have to give up?
I think Carolina's going to have to hold out for at least a third, considering what they gave up to get him. And another one that just came to mind, really funny one, maybe the New York Jets. Yeah. Maybe the Jets take a swing, and just especially if Aaron Rodgers just doesn't have it anymore, because I don't know. I haven't been too impressed by what I've seen out of New York over the first 2 weeks of the season. I think maybe it's too early to tell at this point, and they're probably not going to panic anytime soon. But that'd be an interesting one to swing a trade for Bryce Young, let him sit behind Rodgers for a year or two, and then maybe bring him in. I don't know.
It's so weird that we're talking about this. It's not unprecedented that, hey, this guy from the 2021 NFL draft, like, it's not working out. The 2023 NFL draft is the kicker here. Yeah. It's like, this is so fresh in our mind. You made the point of giving a king's ransom to get the guy. And I don't know, like, what do you gain by Sam Darnold coming in and getting you to 4-13? Like,
nothing.
Yeah, and that's it'd be one thing if Bryce was some second rounder, maybe like, we got this one wrong. But it's weird to think that he is broken, and there's got to be somebody in that organization that says, well, Mayfield and Darnold, are we doing this again? We're going to give him to somebody else, and we're going to look like stooges. So, man. All right, I won't talk to you until next Wednesday. So your Texans-Vikings prediction is what?
I think the Texans are going to win. I just think that team is super talented. I thought they were going to have a down year this season. I was a little bit further down on them than I think you were coming into the year, but through 2 weeks, it looks like they're rolling right along with what we saw last season. So I think Houston's going to be one of those teams that's contending for the AFC title this season. So I'm going to go Houston 31, Vikings 24.
Okay. I'm different. I'm a believer now. I do this weird thing. I was talking about this on a radio show this morning. The Vikings were so bad at home last year, 2-6, that I believe in mathematical justice. I think it's going to come back like 6-2 this year. And I think if they could beat the 49ers, I know they can beat the Texans. Yeah. I think that CJ Stroud will see shit that he's never seen because of Captain Flores on defense. So I think the Vikings do win this one in a squeaker. Welcome back, folks. We've missed you. 27-24. And I was saying from the very beginning that I don't think the Vikings would lose both of these home games. But I was totally emboldened by watching the 49ers game, because if it wasn't for the stupid goal line fumble, the Vikings felt like the entire game, like, oh, hey, we're about to go up 17-3. Like, we're just going to step on their throats. It was not a customary O'Connell victory where you're monkeying around and then you need Greg Joseph to come in and win it for you. It felt commanding. And I swear to God, the reason that everything is going so well for the Vikings offense is because they can run the football. Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler apiece are averaging 5.9 yards per touch, and it just completely changes everything. We haven't had this since 2021 Dalvin Cook, where you can hand the rock to a running back or dump it to him in the flat. And it just keeps everybody in that secondary honest for a team that, oh, by the way, has Jefferson, usually Addison, Hawkinson will be back. And so I trust this team. I mean, I thought they'd beat the Giants. I didn't think they'd beat the 49ers, but they flat out look fucking good when I watch them.
They do.
Yeah. All right. So you're sticking with the 7-pointer. That's fair. You'll probably be right, damn it. But are you like me now that when you look at the schedule, like you're like, I don't know, the Packers game doesn't seem too mighty. We can win in London.
I mean,
Lions at home. Ooh.
I mean, yeah, you look at it, it's like Packers aren't going to have Jordan Love, and unless Malik Willis is all of a sudden just the latest reclamation project at the quarterback position. Spoiler, I don't think that he quite is that. I don't think that game looks as scary. New York and London doesn't look nearly as scary as I thought it was coming into the season. Like you said, Detroit looks definitely beatable with whatever is going on there. Just Dan Campbell just doing the goofy Dan Campbell shit that he does all the time. So maybe they can squeak out a couple wins there. But yeah, the schedule definitely does not look nearly as daunting as it did coming into the year.
Yeah, and then it really gets easy or easier after the let's see, starting with the Colts game. And we've known that since May. So that's the cool part. I saw some article or some tweet that questioned Malik Willis's arm strength. And isn't he one of the, have one of the most rocket arms in the NFL?
That was definitely the thing that I liked most about him coming into the draft was just he was super mobile and he could throw the ball downfield. I thought he had a pretty good arm in college, so I don't know about that.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was a tweet or something. I don't know if it was a Bleacher Report thing, but I was thinking, wait a second, that's like his thing, his arm. It'd be like saying Joe Milton.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't quite have the juice to throw it. Yep. All right, man. We'll talk to you next Wednesday, about a 3-0 Vikings team or a 2-1 team that is peaking ahead of Packer Week. All right, sir?
Sounds good. See you then, man.
All right. Take it easy.